Hello friends, welcome back. Dr. Larry Mitnaul, child and adolescent psychiatrist. Glad that you stopped in again. So in this video, you're going to learn and better understand how your kids are using their online access. You'll also identify some of the most concerning trends about their use, and you'll also get just a little bit of the psychology as well, underlying how kids can get trapped. You'll also be better prepared to tackle some of the perils and pitfalls of our current digital age. So it is really important to understand why to set good boundaries and how to prepare our kids to know how to use technology as a tool, rather than being taken advantage of by it. So having a clear philosophy of tech use in the life of your family will open up space for forming some lasting connections and overall a much stronger relationship. So watching till the end will get you started on recognizing what are the vulnerable spots in your family plan and philosophy. And ultimately, you'll be moving one step closer to raising strong, resilient kids who can really recognize online danger. I mean, really, when you think about it, what could be more important than protecting our kids? I mean, there's only one thing that I can think of, and that's hitting the like button and leaving a comment. Okay, it's a small thing, I know, but honestly, it actually helps us to reach and strengthen more families. So thanks for joining the mission. Now, let's get to it.
All right, and so as Abby mentioned, I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist practicing here in Wichita, Kansas. And basically over the last 3 years, I've built a child and adolescent psychiatry outpatient clinic with Ascension Health, and I continue to work with adults sometimes as well on the inpatient unit, trading call with some of my partners here. And so in general, I see approximately 80 kids a week on average who may be struggling with a range of difficulties from socializing with peers, or anxiety, depression, trauma, anger, hallucinations, and the kids range typically from like 5 to 18 years old, but there are some who sneak in and stay with me a little bit longer if they have some developmental delays or are on the autism spectrum. So I love my work, and so some of you may be surprised listening to me about the amount of time that I spend in my clinic devoted to the topic of online safety, actually, in one form or another. And so as you've heard as well from them, I also have kind of skin in the game, so to speak, being the father of 5 kids. So I'm going to give my early apologies too if you happen to hear them outside of my office or behind me. Unfortunately, my office isn't soundproof, so maybe on the upgrade in 20 years I'll be able to do that. But obviously you're here because you're interested in the theme of online safety for your kids and why this is so important. And so my hope for tonight is that one, that I don't sound hyperbolic and like Chicken Little and the sky is falling, but to hopefully convey that there is a very real danger. And I think understanding what's going on and what's at stake can be very, very helpful for parents and those who really care for kids. So I have about 5 objectives, which I'm going to try to do, and I tend to speak fast, so my apologies if I do. And actually, so that you're able to listen and don't feel compelled to take notes, I'm probably going to summarize this, on my website or blog, that I have as well, so that if there are any resources that I kind of breeze by, you'll have that as a secondary reference. All right, so objectives for tonight, and hopefully some take-home points that'll be helpful for you. One would be better understanding how kids today are using social media and online access. 2, being able to identify and recognize some of the most common strategies, predatory strategies too, that kids might encounter online. 3 would be to give you guys some more ideas about being able to strategize on a screen time plan and philosophy for your home. The 4th would be knowing what resources that you might have or be able to use at your disposal to help protect your kids. And lastly, thinking about and spending a little bit of time on ways to talk to kids about safety online. All right, so the importance of this topic really began to surface during my fellowship training at Dartmouth, where I'd often see families struggling with a whole range of issues related to their children's social media use. And so that would go from, from sexting, so sending, sexually explicit, pictures, and access at times to media, which often cause some strife in the family. And so probably most of you will remember too. So what brought this even more, into my consciousness was, when the national media was making waves about the proposed, kind of Momo challenge, where parents were getting really worried about, a viral game where kids were encouraged to violence and suicide. All right, so while the facts around that story about the Momo challenge didn't really pan out in the way that it was portrayed or taken, I think it did shine a spotlight on our general kind of cultural concerns, and maybe a reason for us to have heightened awareness about how our kids have access to both really good and potentially dangerous content. So so in my practice, I've seen kids drawn into sneaking out of their homes or the homes of their parents for clandestine meetings with an internet friend. I've unfortunately heard many families talking about their kids encountering an adult who misportrayed themselves online and had been intentionally either kind of grooming or leading astray their child, and also of scammers requesting information or trying to slowly leak information from kids about parents' social security numbers or credit card numbers from some of these kids that were unsuspecting and didn't realize what was going on to them. So let's spend some time talking and taking a look at least at how kids are using technology. And so most of this data I've gotten from a survey that's actually a couple of years old. So in my practice, I'm just going to assume a 5 to 10% increase, just based on what I see. But I'm just going to report to you at least what technology use looks like in our country on average. So the average age at which a child gets a cell phone in the U.S. is about 10 years old right now. 20 to 30% of kids report, having been cyberbullied at some point in their lifetime. There's a good resource online at missingkids.org. It's actually the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And so they're a registry and also a resource for parents, for kids, for law enforcement. But there are many striking things on that website. But one of the lines in their most recent reports is that they've received reports on online enticement. So that's kids being kind of lured, to either give money or for exploitation of some kind. So nearly on almost every digital platform that they've received reports that this has been happening to kids. So, kids overwhelmingly use their phones to text. In a recent survey that I mentioned, 31% of parents surveyed said that their kids text them while they're in the same home under the same roof. Now, again, some of us might have drum sets in the basement, and our spouses had to page us to text us to also come up as well. But again, kind of an interesting statistic. In the 2016 survey that I'm referencing, parents' grip on electronic use has also kind of loosened up a bit over time. And so the amount of parents who said that that they were hovering more in terms of looking at the use of their kids' technology actually declined from 49%, so nearly half of parents, to about 41% over a 4-year span. So this was tracking parents kind of over time and looking at their behaviors and practices. And so at the time of the survey, about 27% of parents said that they used online programs to try to control and filter sites or certain platforms. And so the difference over the 4-year span was actually an increase by about 4%. So in addition to this overall habit, if you will, of maybe a slightly more relaxed, kind of go with the flow parent approach to independent use and access to the internet, there's been a jump in the way that kids are using it and the amount of time that they're spending on it. So in this survey, 85% of kids accessed the internet from a shared family space. So this would have been 4 years ago, excuse me. That 85% of kids had accessed the internet from a shared family space, and that dropped to about 75, 76% in the follow-up study 4 years later. And 24% reported having private access to the internet from their bedrooms, and so that 24%, that's compared to 15% again 4 years prior. So you can kind of see the trends in both the access and ability independent of parents and supervision as that's been growing. So in my practice, I think the change is even much more dramatic than that, to be honest. I mean, in my practice, I think that for the most part, nearly 80% of the kids have some amount of private access to the internet in their bedrooms. So 64% of kids in the survey had access to the internet via their own kind of laptop or tablet, compared to 42%, the 4 years prior. So a 20% jump over a four-year span. And in terms of again the having kind of a family computer center in a public space, that was previously 70% of households surveyed, dropped down to just about half, so about 54%. So again, not to kind of get caught up in numbers, but hopefully this is painting a picture of what the general trends are. 38% had access to the internet through their phone, 19 and 26% through gaming consoles and the like. So what has this meant in the child-parent dyad, as we like to call it, or that relationship between parent and child? Well, it turns out in terms of discipline that kids were receiving or getting in trouble, that doubled actually over a 4-year span. So when interviewing these parents, asking, how often is there a parent-enforced timeout from texting, from social media, from platforms, from apps on their kids' phone, it went from 14% up to 34% of parents over that 4-year time span. So some of the data out there suggests that about 50% of kids have some social media account by the age of 12. And again, in my clinical practice, I think actually that rate has been rising, and we can hypothesize as to why that is. I mean, as we were talking about earlier before this started, we've all been at home more often, spending more time in closed quarters, with less opportunity for mobilizing our kids to either be outside or be engaged in other activities. And so I think that number's been steadily climbing. The largest percentage of kids, so 39%, had their first social media account. Again, that's the Snapchat, TikTok, Discord, fill in the blank, between the ages of 10 and 12. But another 11% got a social media account when they were younger than 10 years old. So what are these kids using? And I've already named some of them. So the TikToks, the Discords, the Snapchat, the Instagram, Lyrically, Facebook I'd include in there, although all the teens tell me that's actually for old people now, Dr. Mitnaul. Kids aren't using that anymore. But all right, so unless I sound like a Luddite, there are good things about technology, and so I'm sure I don't need to convince you all about it, but it might be helpful to at least extol, why is it that we care? So our more relaxed approach to allowing our kids to have some of these goods, unmerited, and actually there are many good things. So most of us parents most of us parents, I think, maybe I'm speaking for myself, but I've heard it from other families too, are grateful for the blossoming of really good online content that happened over the quarantine period. I mean, I think I made use of a lot of Mo Willems books. So if there are parents out there that have not read books by Mo Willems, he's just one of my favorites. And actually, I think there's a lot of psychological goodness and resilience baked into his Elephant and Piggy book series. Anyway, I'm not paid for that endorsement, but I just love his books. But anyway, he was reading books online. I think a lot of celebrities are reading their books. Obviously, encyclopedias are no longer kind of on our shelves collecting dust, but most of them, our kids encounter and we encounter kind of in person, online. Being caught up in current events, access to libraries and having discussions like these. I mean, all really wonderful things, museums, and the opera. So not to get too far off base, but, actually over this quarantine, I actually was able to get my kids to watch opera because we had access to the Met, right, and got to see some of the best performances in the world. So the what is it, the Magic Flute, I think that's the one we watched, and it was absolutely beautiful. So there's wonder, there's amazement, there's ways to kind of cultivate our kids too that also come with connection to the digital world. So why is this so attractive, and why is this allure so hard? I mean, I think we all are aware that we use it a lot, that our kids want to use it and in whatever limited way they can access it. And so the click is very appealing, right? So, I mean, just that little, mouse tap or the tap on the screen, especially to a child's kind of natural impulsivity and curiosity. I mean, for you and me, our voyage into knowledge, growing up probably required, again, mining dusty old books and spending time more time in the physical library, maybe some occasional internet searches with, web crawler, which wasn't nearly as strong as Google. And perhaps, the dreaded long meandering conversation with your grandpa about, this is what I used to do back in the day, or let me tell you about the war. And so there's a whole body of research on clicking and human behavior. And so I'm not going to recite a lot of the research here, but if you're up for some fascinating articles, check out a term called the primacy effect and clicking. And so there's a whole lot of behavioral science that goes into developing web pages and grabbing people's attention and having them stay connected to the material once they are on it. And so our kids aren't any less susceptible than we are to being drawn in. So online materials often present, also just kind of immediate gratification. And so you get the feedback of the information that you're looking for, the interesting picture or the interesting idea without the hassles of, again, mining through books or talking to humans. And so where's the disconnect? So part of the disconnect is, we teach our kids, don't talk to strangers, right? We say things like, don't open the door to someone you don't know. We say things like, don't answer, that phone or give my information to the, telemarketer trying to sell me something, right? And so we monitor where our kids go, who they play with, what shows they watch, what books they read or magazines are on their shelves. And so, more, not less, level of vigilance is going to be required, I think, to help us to manage our kids' online presence and how they access it.